Alright, so this game is a bit of a doozy. So this game is called 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I believe I said this right. I got this on sale on the PS Store for like 30 bucks. I was interested in it for a while, but I don't know. I didn't want to commit to the $60 price tag, so I just saw it for 30, so I decided to pick it up. Um, I do know the developer of this game. They did Odin Sphere and Dragon's Crown. Dragon's Crown, I played with some friends, and we had a pretty good time with that. But the main game I liked from them was Odin Sphere. I played that randomly. I think I played it on my Vita, and I thought that game was really great. It had some problems, but overall, it's great. I thought the combat was really good. The story was interesting, and obviously the art direction was great. So I was pretty excited to play this game finally. This game, though, is a complete departure from their previous gameplay from the past two. The past two games were more like 2D beat 'em ups, and while this one still has the same 2D side-scrolling gameplay segments, there's no like beat 'em up. It's an RTS instead. Well, it's split between like I'd say an adventure visual novel segments and a real-time strategy game, which was very surprising. I didn't think this is what the game was going to be, but it's sort of split up. It shows you the it starts off with just showing you the adventure segments, the gameplay segments, and a segment called analysis, which lets you analyze the various aspects of the story, which is like the main focal point here. They took the story from the past. Well, here's the thing. In Odin Sphere, it was like a balance between story and gameplay, like 50-50. In Dragon's Crown, it was more like, 90% gameplay, 10% story. Story didn't even matter in Dragon's Crown. But in this, I feel like it's like an 80-20 split. Like you're mainly playing this for the narrative here. And that holds up to the and it holds up overall. But the gameplay we'll get to in a bit. But the one thing I have to mention before really getting into it is just how many themes, plot devices, genres this game like covers. Mind you, this was like a 23-hour play session before I beat it all, and the amount of things they bring up, without spoiling too much, you get things like time traveling, alternate dimensions, romance. There's surprisingly a decent amount of romance in here. You might be thinking that I just told you about time traveling and alternate dimensions. I was like, well, that sounds like a huge plot, but to be honest, it's not at all. You find that within like the first hour of the game, and it doesn't mean anything. Because there's going to be so many other various tropes and themes that come up that you're going to be having trouble balancing them all. And that's that's what the analysis part is for. It's very helpful in keeping track of everything that's going on. I'll go into the detail more about that later. But the whole idea is like you're getting a lot in this story. It's a lot to keep up with, but I feel like it's all it's well done enough. I think it's written well enough where you can keep track of everything and still connect the dots on your own, but it can get a little confusing at times. I will say that. But I just wanted to start with saying there's just a lot going on. But first off, the first thing that anyone notices when they're playing a game is the graphics, and 13 Sentinels has got to be Vanillaware's best-looking game. Like, Odin Sphere and Dragon's Crown look great, but it feels like there's like a little more detail in the models in 13 Sentinels and the backgrounds in general. Their art style just looks great no matter what. It's going to be one of the few art styles that hold up for like long-term in terms of like anime. Most anime games, they don't really hold up too well, like that you can see the age in them. But this one, considering how detailed everything is, and the whole sprite work, or I don't even know if it's sprite work. I think it's sprite work. It's hard to tell sometimes, but the point is it's going to hold up for a very long time, and there's always something interesting to look at. But yeah, it just looks fantastic. But like I mentioned before, the game is structured just you do the adventure segments, then gameplay, and then if you want, you can analyze, everything that's happened in the story. Now, starting with the adventure segments. Now, if you've played any sort of visual novel like Fate Stay Night, or this is going to be pretty niche here, but like Ever 17, or maybe Muv Love, that's a little more popular. But it is pretty much a visual novel. I mean, it's not first person perspective, but it's a VM. But you go around as 13 different characters, so you have 13 different stories to account for, and each character has a completely different motive and a goal, and they meet other characters that some characters don't meet. And the whole point is to just play through, advance the story, try to figure out things as you go, and try to connect the dots in terms of story and things like that. Just like I said, it's a lot to keep up with. And 13 characters is, I've never really even seen that in a game where it has that many protagonists. Each character has a completely different goal or even like timeline. Some characters are in the past, some characters are in the future, some characters are in present day. Some characters have a specific goal in mind. Some characters just live out most of their path in like a sort of a daily routine kind of thing until something big happens. Just for example, one character meets this little robot, and she sort of has to help him. That's like kind of her whole route. She sort of helps him out with whatever the little robot's goals are. And while doing that, we figure out more about the story, what the robot actually is, and things like that. But another character is a war veteran who got transported to the future. So he's trying to get his bearings on like how everything has changed or what he should be doing now. Like it's all very interesting, and they keep switching it up on you, so you can never really guess where the story is going to go. I like to think I played a decent amount of visual novels, so I like to think I knew how the story was going to advance. But and in some cases I did guess right, but in others I didn't. And those twists kind of happen periodically throughout the whole game. But yeah, it's really cool. I will say there's a lot of references to sci-fi fiction in general. E.T., War of the Worlds, kaiju or big monster flicks in general. So it's pretty cool seeing all that. But trying not to say too much, the narrative flows with like every character. It depends, right? Because every character either starts off like very slow and then builds up to like a big climax, or some just start out with like in the middle of some very important event or important revelation. So you're getting a different experience depending on the character that you decide to play as for that amount of time. But yeah, usually there's going to be points where you'll see a scene in the same scene in two different characters' routes, which is kind of cool because then you can sort of line up how both those characters ended up in that point. So I thought that was pretty cool. Overall, though, I think the narrative's great. You're buying this game for the story. That's just how it is. I'll get into the gameplay, but the narrative is the selling point, and the art direction too. But the narrative is definitely the selling point for this. Now, on to the gameplay. The gameplay at first is kind of interesting. It's a RTS. That means real-time strategy. So you the way it's designed is like the characters from the adventure mode are put into these giant robots called Sentinels, and you use these Sentinels to fight like the kaiju invasion. So a bunch of mechanical monsters are coming to invade the city. I won't explain why. You'd have to play the game to figure it out. But the point is, it seemed like for the first couple, it's like divided up into stages. So you'll do like a wave, right? Like you'll do a wave, and then you do the next one, and the next one, and you'll kind of advance like that. So after the first couple waves or stages, I was like, yeah, this is interesting. I don't really play too many RTS games, so it felt kind of new. You beat stages and you advance the story. You'll get these points, which you can use to upgrade your Sentinels so they can do more attacks or, more damage or whatever. Once you get to a certain point, the gameplay really, really falls off. And my problem with it is, at first, you don't have too many options, right? So you have to be kind of smart with how you use them. But once you get some points to upgrade it and you get access to certain abilities, the game becomes really, really easy, really boring too. Specifically, like the sentry gun power-up, you can place I think it was up to like 10 at a time. And once you have at least like 5 of those things on the screen, it's like they just wipe out everything for you. Other moves just wipe everything out, like long-range missiles. That's a great move. There's EMP moves, which just drop enemies down and force them so they can't move. I'm like, all right, that's really good. The point is, I was never in trouble at all during the gameplay. Not once. It's very, very easy. And the other problem is the way the adventure mode or the visual novel mode advances, that you have to do. There's going to be a point where you're going to have to do gameplay stages. You're going to have to get through a certain amount of stages before you can advance the story. And it's the problem is that the story completely overshadows the gameplay. Because as the narrative, goes along, you're going to get closer and closer to the climax, and you're going to really want to know what's going to happen. But they're going to block you off until you do the required amount of stages to pass. And at that point, when that kind of happened, I was like, all right, I'm just going to put the game on. There's like a casual, normal, and hard. I was playing on normal. I'm like, screw it. I'm going to play on casual mode and just try to get through these as fast as possible, which sort of means they kind of failed in terms of making compelling gameplay. It's like polar opposites. The story has a lot of depth and a lot of plot lines and thematic elements to think about, but the gameplay is incredibly straightforward and just becomes a nuisance later on. It's just, you just kind of wish it wasn't there in the first place. I kind of wish there was after I beat it, there would be a mode where you can replay the story after you beat the game once, which is cool. But I kind of wish there was just a mode where it sort of resets, but you can just play the adventure mode and not do the battle mode. Because the thing is, with the adventure mode, you can play a certain character's route up to a certain point. Sometimes it locks you off, right? And the two ways to get it either is to advance another character's route to a certain point or do some gameplay stages. I kind of like how it's structured, so you have to go in a specific order. If I were to replay it now, I would just do one character's route completely and then do another character's route completely. And that's not how they want you to experience the story, so I don't think that would be very fun. But that's just how I see it. But overall, if you're a person that likes good narratives and games, then even with the gameplay with the way it is, you'll still feel like you got your money's worth. That's the main point. The narrative is that good. It is that interesting. But hell, if you like the gameplay, that's great. That's fantastic. But if you don't, which I guess most people don't, I did check up reviews before I purchased the game. They did say the gameplay was a bit lacking compared to the story and art. I mean, it's obvious. The art's top tier, and the story's fantastic. So the gameplay just wasn't enough to keep up with it. I kind of wish that Vanillaware, for their next game, would go back to maybe not a 2D beat-em-up, but a more action-oriented style of game. You can still... And maybe even narrow down the narrative. The problem with the narrative, I'd say, is there's so much going on. There's just too much going on at times. Maybe narrow it down to one specific theme, just time travel or just nanomachines, and really hone in on that and make that the whole story. I liked what they did here, but maybe they can go for a more focused experience in their next game. Now, for the story, again, it's confusing, but they do. Going back to the section called analysis, this became incredibly helpful in terms of connecting all the dots. It lists all events that happen in the game by character, and there's just an all events tab that just has every event in chronological order as well. So you can go down and connect the dots yourself, and it shows you what event happened where. But it's also just fun to look through because, you're just going through lore. I love reading up on lore in games. I find it very interesting. And this is just pretty much a lore dump for this entire game. So, yeah, I definitely recommend checking that out. There's also something called, mystery... I don't know. It's mystery points or whatever. It's a section where you use the points that you get from clearing the stages in the game to buy, character profiles and whatnot. And again, it just gives you more lore, more info about a character. It was a fun little thing to work towards too. Overall, I'd say it's a solid title that I might come back to in the future, which is weird because usually with story games, it's a one and done thing. But considering this one has so many themes and plot lines to think about, I might get something more out of it a second time around. I didn't think I understood everything even this first time around. I understood enough where I can clear it and then move on with the game. But I also feel like there was things I'm missing. And maybe, down the line, I'll play it again for a second time around. But I do recommend it. It's a very interesting game, that's for sure. Okay, thank you for listening.